So I guess to more or less kind of get started here then, because so I'm sure maybe Susanna had already told you how this all kind of got started here, but she had posted on her story with regards to the film Love Venezia. I think is how I pronounced the name of the city. So Venezia.
Venezia. Yeah.
Venezia. Okay, okay.
Close. Yeah, yeah.
So she posted it. I saw it, and I mentioned to her that I would love to check it out. And then she said, "Let's set
Yeah.
something up." And then got the ball rolling there. And because of her, I got linked up with you, and then of course Steve, the director, as well.
Cool.
So with Steve, on the other hand, I found out because the film hasn't gotten distribution yet that it hasn't been released for viewing as of right now. So he was kind enough to send me 6 clips that I have viewed. I kind of got more or less the core of the story.
Yeah.
But there were some things that I was really curious about to delve into with you, as I mentioned before. But so here's what I wanted to start off here with you to kind of get this rolling here because so I when I first saw the trailer, I saw the censored version of it. And
Hmm.
what surprised me was the fact that there was even a trailer that was kind of out there in that capacity here.
Sure.
So then I saw the uncensored version as well too. I forgot where link it led me to, but I checked it out. So this is actually kind of more or less the first official question that I want to ask you because when I talked to Susanna a few years ago about her role in Normal, I had asked her about the fact that she has a nude scene in that movie, how she felt about it prior, during, and then after the fact, and she kind of delved into it to give me a perspective from where she was at that time and where she's at now, at least at that point.
Hmm.
I've never thought about it from a male's perspective about how someone would feel about putting themselves out there in that sense. I had heard a conversation that you had done, I believe, over a year ago, if I remember correctly, where I forgot what the name of the play because I actually didn't write it down, but it was a play that you did in Palm Springs where you do
Yeah.
have like a butt shot on during the play.
Yeah. Right.
But at that time, you had mentioned in that conversation that you were, it took a lot of convincing for you to get to be comfortable to go out and do that scene, to do that particular scene there.
Right.
And then I was wondering what changed from that leading up to that, you being comfortable and then eventually getting to more or less an escalated sexual, I guess, situation, if you will, specifically for this movie. But again, like I said before, I've never really heard it or thought about it from a male perspective. But when I heard you say that in that conversation, it triggered a lot of things for me to want to delve into to see where you came from, that where your reservations were at, what was the convincing like, what was the whole process to get you convinced to feel comfortable, and then once you got to this point where this is the movie and these are the scenes, are you okay with it at this point to get that escalated for yourself? So I'm actually really curious about that perspective for yourself from the very beginning to where you are with it now.
Yeah. So the play Gently Down the Stream
That's
in
the one,
Palm
yeah.
Springs. Yeah. That was my very first time doing any sort of nudity whatsoever. And the reason why I felt okay to do it was Terry, my co-star, just made me very comfortable about it. Really just asked and made sure what was okay. And I agreed to do it because it made sense in that story. In other words, it wasn't just nudity for the sake of having nudity, like some
Right.
projects, like let's just throw that in there. There wasn't anything, raunchy or vulgar about it. It was, it's about two people in love and their relationship over 20 years and how it changes over time and how sex plays into that, which I think is a very real thing for a lot of people that are in relationships on how that evolves over time. And so for me, I just sort of was fascinated by that idea, just that it wasn't, oh, here's my butt. It was like it was art,
Right, right.
and then once the film came around and this opportunity came out, the core of the story, is what drew me to it. And that was the idea that we live in such a hookup culture, where, you catch feelings and it's like, you don't want that. And I had sort of as a gay man, like I've sort of had to deal with a lot of like body dysmorphia and elements of that my entire life, where I think a lot of people just don't realize. I mean, I know it exists in with straight couples and everything too,
Yeah.
but with gay men specifically, there's this sometimes this underlying sizing up sort of element. I don't know like really how to explain it, but it's almost like a lot of people you're almost wired to sometimes compare yourself
Is that
physically.
part of the culture as far as the gay community is concerned, where you're expected to look, have a certain physique to uphold? Because like I know I understand what you're saying because I've heard this argument before. I think it was like two straight people talking about it. This was like years ago, where one of the things I think a woman had said is that a lot of gay men that I've come across are in the best shape, more so than straight men,
Yeah,
and that's kind of like the standard.
right.
So when I heard that, this is again years ago, I never really thought of it as something that was just like a standard thing for again in this case for a lot of gay men to have to live up to. But because you mentioned this now because I heard that same conversation I was referring to earlier, where you were in a relationship where it was almost demanded of you to have to maintain that.
Yeah.
So have you lost a little bit of that, that's stress where you feel like you have to maintain it, or is it kind of was it
Yeah.
slowly kind of coming off of that point where once you got to these roles that it wasn't a thing for you?
Yeah, I think the play was the start of that. I think in some
Okay.
ways, I know I was judged for doing it by certain people in my life,
Right.
but I had to do it for me. It was almost very therapeutic and healing that I was just making that choice to present myself as I was on that stage in the most, vulnerable, raw form possible. And it wasn't even full nudity, but that
Right.
was like my intro into it. And then with the film, it was the same sort of thing where it was almost like me reclaiming my personal my inner confidence in myself and my body, and just accepting it for as it is.
Right.
And that's really what that whole process of shooting Love Venezia was for me, was this really healing journey about self-acceptance and meaning, and that sex is so much more than just a
Mhm.
physical thing between two people, and that it can be something meaningful and beautiful and wonderful. And I think a lot of the times that can get lost just with that physical element, where we're so it's almost like sometimes where in the past, like when I would have a partner and we would be intimate, I would be thinking about my own body sometimes more than my partner's body. And that's
Interesting.
weird. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Interesting.
it's a weird mindset where you're like, I'm being intimate with this person. I'm not being intimate with myself right now. But that was kind of the wiring. And I'm from the Midwest
Right.
originally,
Yeah.
and I think in some ways maybe that's just ingrained in there as kind of a I had to, and there was this underlying feeling of like I had to always prove myself, and and just be the best that I could be at everything, because I
Right.
would be judged otherwise. So it's
Is
a
that
hard.
is that common in the Midwest where you have like a certain set of standards you have to live up to, whether it be, I mean, because you talked before again in the same interview that you had where you get along with your family very, very well. So I'm not sure if because I guess what I want to understand is that is it the standards that were set by your family or just the overall community that you lived at that time?
Yeah, it wasn't my family. I mean, my
Okay.
family's the most supportive,
Right.
wonderful people. It was more so that I grew up in like I went to a private school, as a
Okay.
private Christian school. So there were a lot of elements there where
Oh, I see. I see.
it
Okay.
was understood like, oh, you're gay or whatever, but it was just something that was never, it's like, that's fine, but just don't talk about it, or just don't show it, but it's fine. It's a weird psychology to kind of
So it's
digest.
like it's okay to be yourself, but don't show yourself. That's kind of the
Sort of.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And so
Interesting.
that's why acting for me, since I was a kid, was always this escape from a lot of that. It was this outlet for me to play other people and deal with other people's lives and
Right.
issues and everything, and just take a step out of mine for a little bit, just a break from the heaviness that would cause sometimes as someone growing up, in the Midwest.
So, did you like when you started doing acting, especially during those like tumultuous periods of with relationships and the environment that you had lived in with going to you mentioned before a private Christian school, and I know you mentioned before about the fact that there were some people that had mentioned to your mother about they knew that you were gay and they were expressing some concerns, almost as if they're like, "Hey, he's gay, but are you okay?" Something to that effect.
Yeah.
But when you started doing some acting, very early on, like I guess what I'm wondering is that when did you start to realize when where acting became more or less kind of a therapeutic part of your life where it helped you kind of release some of that stress, if you will, where you had something going on in at your life, and then all of a sudden you start doing a role, whether it be a play or a film, whatever it may be, that made you realize that, this is actually a great outlet for me that took me a while to get to that point and realize that this is actually helping me out as a person rather than taking a part for the sake of, just to do it, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was never someone who was really into sports or, I never found like what exactly that outlet was
Mm.
in school of what that was presented, to
Right.
be. So for me, I had to seek it out elsewhere. And so drama was something for me where that was really the first time where I saw people that were out
Right.
and comfortable with themselves was in theater. It was the first time I really saw adults who were gay and had a partner and like it wasn't just this hush hush thing. It was really the first time where I was seeing like what an actual adult being gay, could look like.
Right.
So for me, I gravitated towards that because it was like, oh, this is that outlet to do that. So when I was a kid and I started doing, plays, immediately I knew that, hey, this is my way to sort of have a release and figure out this other aspect of my life. Because otherwise, I mean, I think that's the thing, and it's important to point out that I was a very happy kid. I had a very good family. There wasn't anything sad or traumatic, and so I think that's important to highlight too. That like the issue wasn't coming from me. It was coming from certain people that were around me, and some people would present it in a way like they were being concerned for you, but I wasn't having an issue. It's
Right.
their own discomfort and lack of education. Sometimes primarily is what it comes down to.
So with you finished when you guys were done shooting Love Venezia, I'm trying to really be careful how I say it properly.
Venezia, yeah, close.
Venezia. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So once you got done with that, did you with with in this particular case with the sex scenes, the sexuality, the upfrontness with that, because especially with the trailer, I mean, as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, this is going to be a film that I did not expect until I
Yeah.
saw the uncensored version. But once you had done that, did you have any sort of concerns at all after the fact? Because I guess the reason I'm asking is because, the film is shot to be fairly explicit, but then you're going back home and I'm wondering, like, do you have concerns about I want my mom to see this? Does anything that cross your mind at all when it comes to like how you're presenting yourself in this capacity and then going back home and you're telling mom, I had a sex scene in this movie, but it's very graphic or whatever the case may be. Like, do you have a little bit of concerns with that at all? Or do you just are in the moment and then boom, go with it?
I mean, there's definitely some concern. There was even before filming it,
Okay.
that was definitely something that was going through my mind. But I had a lot of conversations about that with everyone and with my family, included. And um, basically, like I said, it came down to the fact that it isn't just explicit,
Right.
it's like it is something that there is so much heart and there is so much story and there's just so much meaning in this entire film that it really is secondary. Like that stuff, if certain people go into it with the mindset that like that's all it's going to be and it's going to be this 50 shades of gray sort of element,
Right.
they're really they're misjudging it in a way, I think, but that they're underestimating, I think, what the experience really can be. Is yes, that's a part of it, but it's
Right.
it's what that means, and it's not that it's just, hey, let's hook up. It's so imperative to the overall growth of this entire character.
Right.
And that's really what did it for me is it's a reminder that I'm an actor,
Right.
and I am playing someone who is a human being, and this human being had this experience, and human beings have sex. Human beings are people who are in love, who have ups and downs. And if it's this secret thing that we try to hide and cover so much, we're not really being vulnerable, transparent actors. And so what better way to just be that transparent person than to just say, you know what? I'm diving head first. I'm not going to judge myself for this. I'm not going to let anyone else judge me for this because I know what it means. And I believe in this story.
Do you ever get a chance to see a cut of the film after it was already completed?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the finished version on a
So,
big
so
screen.
when you saw it, like, what was the first impression you got after seeing the movie? Like, what's the first thing that came to mind after watching it? Like, what that left you thinking about, after everything you had said just now, did you have a sense of satisfaction of what you've been able to accomplish and what you saw on the screen, or do you still have a little bit of like, yeah, I could have done this a little bit better?
No, I'm super proud of it. I'm super
Okay.
pleased. And I'm somebody who's very self-critical, and about everything. And it's funny because when I was watching the entire thing, I wasn't thinking about my body or anything like that at all. I was
Okay.
so immersed into what was happening on screen. And in many ways, I think after the first 5 or 10 minutes, I sort of forgot it was me. I mean,
Interesting.
it's just that element of like, I'm here to have this experience like anyone else who's sitting here watching it. And if I sit there and judge myself, the entire time, it's really going to defeat the purpose. And so for me, it was more of like those little moments that would come up where I'd be like, wow, like I remember exactly what that felt like. Anytime I would cry or there'd be this really intimate moment, there were some moments that came up where I was like, yeah, I remember that flight home. Like I remember what that felt like and sort of the heartbreak that I did kind of experience during this, just allowing myself to do that. And I think that's
Right.
what a lot of people need to realize when they watch something like this is when it is such a vulnerable film that it takes a very strong decision and confidence and just vulnerability to do it. Like anyone that sits there that knows me that will watch this will know what it means for me and how
Right.
far I have come and just my entire growth. And I think people that watch it with that perspective can have their own growth too. But yeah, I mean, there was for after the first 5 minutes, I was like, wow, this is good. And of course, I was in tears like half the time just because it just makes it very real. You go
Right.
through all of this and it's so extensive and just, tiring and ups and downs and emotional. And then once you finally see it and you feel it and you're proud of it, I don't know how to explain it. There's just this the emotion that comes over you.
Do you think this is one of your possibly your best performance you've ever performed here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Why
Yeah,
do you
for
feel that
sure.
for yourself for this particular role?
I feel because this gave me the biggest showcase. I mean, this was
Okay.
my first feature film lead. And so I've done a
Okay.
lot of projects. I've done a lot of, professional theater. I've done a lot of short films. I've done, some features. But this was my first where I'm carrying the entire thing. And there was just so much that I could personally kind of identify with in this,
Right.
which helped to really just give it my everything. So in many ways, it's a breakout,
Right.
role. It's like for me, this was, and I knew that getting this opportunity. I think a lot of people don't realize how tough
Yeah.
it is in general just to book any film. Period. If you are
Yeah.
not someone who is super famous or related to someone or whatever, it is a tough grind. And I mean, I worked my ass off to get this opportunity and to do it and really prove myself. And yeah, I just feel very rewarded by it.
So there's an interesting question. For some reason, I just dawned on me when you're talking about the hard work you put into this here. But I think you've answered this question before in a previous interview, the same one I'm referring to here about where you talked about your childhood and whatnot. But when you first got into, acting, you expressed how much what exactly sparked it for you about how you got into it and what made you love it, and then the experience you've had with, the positive environment you've had with the various people you've come across through all these productions you've worked on. But so there's a question I want to ask you because I had talked to two producers before, Janine and Jonathan, where they've talked about how whenever they make decisions for a movie, it's about what's the best way they can make a movie to make money. And understandably, I understand we know why they ask that. They are
Yeah,
looking at that way because they have to make money.
business. Yeah,
Right. But for
yeah.
yourself, though, when you first started, I'm pretty positive, and let me know if I'm wrong, that that wasn't necessarily the reason for why you did it, obviously. But as you started getting into it more, and then you've talked about the hard grind of getting into the business and booking parts, whether it be small or large, whatever the case may be, and you're getting your first lead role in a movie. I do wonder that if in time, does your perspective change about how you want to put yourself out there in terms of like, if I do this movie, this will probably get me more awareness for this, the part that I played, and hopefully that will lead into maybe some other auditions or other conversations I could have with other people that can see what I can do, and then therefore hopefully expand more or less the brand, if you will, your brand, if you will. So do you have any sort of that kind of thought process for yourself at all, or is it just purely if it's a great role that I have been passionate about, I don't care, I'm going to do it for those reasons, not for the monetary aspect of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, because first and foremost, I mean, I do it because I love it. You'd be
Right.
crazy to do this business otherwise.
Right.
It is just so much of a roller coaster. But
Yeah.
for me, I definitely have realized that I have a big range as an actor. Like when I look at what I've filmed over this last year, doing more than I ever have. I've been the lead in a I was the lead in a horror project where I'm a straight man. I did another project where oh God, like what was there was another one recently where I was like a soap that I did where I'm straight in that, and then I'm like a villain in another one where I'm very like sneaky and manipulative, and it's all of these different things. So when I look at that picture, it helps because it's very easy to sometimes think, okay, you do a role like this or a movie like this, and then in people's minds, it's like, okay, that's what he does.
Right.
He's gay. He did this movie. He does gay romance movies. He whatever it is, and it shouldn't be because when you actually look at the work that I've done this last year, it is so broad.
Right.
Um, and I'm proud of it. And like those people, a lot of those people have no idea that I even did this film. And I'm just curious to see like how their
The
what it says
reaction.
about people is how their mind
Right.
how they think of me, after they see that compared to
Right.
when cast me in that before, even though I'm the same person and I'm the same actor.
Right.
So it is kind of crazy because we are actors, right? And so we do play different scenarios, and there's all kinds of different gay people, straight people, whatever,
Right.
with different personas. So yeah, I'm curious to see what that happens, what happens with that and all the momentum, and even that we're unreleased, So
Yeah.
as this starts to do some festivals and things like that, it will be fun to meet people around the world and build some of that momentum. And it's already starting a little bit where
Right.
the trailer's gone viral online. I think we had over 600,000 views in 3 days. So
Yeah.
it just you know
Started picking
there's
up
a
pretty
part of it.
quickly.
Yeah.
So leads me to an interesting question for you because I don't know. I know some people in the industry, and I think what I've noticed for myself, and I want to know if from your experience, if maybe if you see it slightly different, but back in the day, the most common thing you would hear with a lot of actors, even directors too, where you do one particular role or one particular type of project, and then you're stuck in that lane, and it's very hard to kind of get out of it. Matthew McConaughey was like doing a bunch of like romantic comedy movies, and he said no, and all of a sudden the offers sort of stopped coming, and then it took a while for him to kind of get that momentum back. But it seems like nowadays there's a little bit more, openness. Like, hey, he did this, she did this, therefore let's try to give him down this route instead and see if they can do more here. I don't think it's like that 100%, but I'm assuming that there might be some openness where people will look at, let's say in this case for yourself, and they see what you've done in previous roles, your current ones right now, and they may think, let's see what else Daniel can do. Is that kind of like, do you think that trend is slowly turning around where you're no longer being typecast? I'm not saying you've been typecast, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
like as far as
Yeah.
an actor is concerned, being typecast for a specific set of parts that they are known for playing, that it's hard to get out of that lane. Like, do you think that's kind of changed a little bit, or do you still feel like it's still a hurdle that every actor is going to go through, no matter what position they're in?
I think it's definitely better.
Okay.
I definitely think it's something where there's more forgiveness for that if you have a big following, with you, or there's something
I
that you're
see.
presenting to a network and you're saying, "Hey, I have, 2 million followers on Instagram." They're not going to give you any trouble, in the same way that someone else who just did something
Mm,
that's breakout that's starting to get going, they're going to look at you a little differently that way, and maybe judge you a little harsher. So there's definitely a lot of uneven elements with that still. It is better for sure. And I think a lot of that has to do with streaming and the fact that there's a lot more there's a lot more diversity in programming, period,
Yeah.
where, things before on network TV, you couldn't show really anything that was halfway edgy. It was just very clean cut.
Right.
And now with streaming, with HBO, Netflix, Hulu, like there's so much diversity in content that I do think it makes it a little easier to have yourself be accepted that, like, okay, I did this type of project, but now I'm gonna do this one.
So do you feel more optimistic though as a result of like all the things that are changing right now when it comes to in this case, because you talked about just in the last year alone, you've shot a horror movie, you played you were worked on a soap where you played straight man in two parts, if I
Yeah,
remember you
yeah,
saying
yeah,
here.
villain, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but like, do you, having gone through that experience just within this last year alone, like, do you feel optimistic about how the momentum for you can change moving forward? I mean, because I understand that the industry is very fickle, that you can't focus on one thing and expect that's going to take off for you. But I mean, I'm wondering if you have some sort of optimism where you look at it like if things are looking the way they are right now, I'm pretty positive that I can find something for me to delve into that will more or less challenge you, broaden your horizon, get you some more awareness of whatever the case may be. Do you have a little bit of optimism for yourself when it comes to that?
I do, yeah, I
Okay.
definitely. I have through this entire process, and
Okay.
that's what speaks to just the crew and everyone involved in the film and the script, and just that I've always known that this was going to be special and that this was going to be great, and that's why I fought, extra hard to be a part of this project. And so I
When you say fought, like what did you mean by fought? I guess like
I
do
was
do
persistent. I was
okay.
persistent. There's thousands of thousands of tapes. Everything's
Right.
virtual now in these self tapes, and I was very persistent in making that connection and making it known that I really believed in what this was and what it meant and what I knew I could bring to the role.
Right.
I mean, the director, Steve, is from Kansas, and I'm originally from Kansas City.
Right.
And, there was that factor. And in many ways, I'm playing loosely, this is loosely based on his experience that he had. So I'm playing essentially him, and my own spin on it, but there's that element. And so I knew that, there was a special connection there, and there was something to talk about with him, and thankfully he trusted that process, and we worked so well together, and we're the best of friends now, so it's great.
That's wonderful. Well, so then explain to me then about with the anticipation because the fact that you brought before about how in 3 days it got over 600,000 views. Like when you saw that momentum building up, like did it give you some confidence that okay, this movie might have some momentum where as soon as we go to a festival that there might be a positive reaction to it, and if so, the next one might be just the same, if not more, considering how the turnout is looking for just the preview alone. But are you
Yeah,
expecting that the film may have some sort of momentum where if you're when you're presenting it, everyone's presenting, I should say, do you feel confident that people will respond to it and that they'll actually have some connection with it where you feel like the word of mouth off of them alone will helpfully spread the word, if you will, of this movie?
I think so. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I feel very confident and hopeful about that. It was, for me, when I started to see those numbers go up, it was confirmation that there's a market, for
Right.
this movie, and that people really respond to what that is. Because if you look at it in the trailer, it really checks off many boxes. So it has the sexy element of it, but it
Right.
also has the romance in it. It also has the conflict and the tears, and there's almost a little bit of like this underlying in the trailer like thriller element where you don't quite know like what's going to happen and where is it going with
Yeah,
this
that's
guy
true.
that's just so perfect. And
Yeah.
why are his friends advising him, to be careful? And there's just all of those things that I think are very real. I mean, I think a lot of the times we're programmed to think, oh, what's wrong with this person? There has to be something wrong.
Yeah.
When in
Yeah.
reality, I think sometimes we're looking for something negative when maybe there really isn't. Yeah.
Do you feel like that with so I guess what I'm going to delve into with you is regards to critiques
Mhm.
because I've asked this to Suzanne before and she had a really interesting response where she said because I asked her if she cares about what the critics would say
Yeah.
about the films that she's in and her answer was really one of the more interesting ones that I've came across here, where she said that, well, I was hired to do a job. I did my job. I was told what to do, and I did it the way they asked. And so I'm kind of like in the clear because I'm just a hired actor. But at the same time, she also pointed out before that now, if someone is criticizing me specifically, saying, your acting sucks or whatever the case may be, it might take a little personal. But then at the same time, she also said that, well, 5 years ago, I wasn't as good of an actor than as I am now. So yeah, that criticism is valid, but it's a growing process for me to get to where I was then to where I'm at now. So for yourself, though, because you are the lead in this movie, how are you preparing yourself for the critiques? Now, it could be positive or negative, but I would assume that with some negatives, there might be something that I'm not sure if you have to prepare for because some people don't handle criticism that well. Some do. I think in this industry, you have to have thick skin to deal with it, good or bad. But I'm curious about how you are going about it for yourself, considering that despite the momentum is building up right now, I'm pretty sure you're also understanding that there's going to be somebody out there that's going to say this movie sucks, and if they're going to say it sucks, why it sucks, and it could be for various reasons, whether they're valid or not. How are you looking at it for yourself to prepare for that once it starts building up from there for yourself and everyone else involved?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with other actor friends, people that are, more well known and everything, and a lot of them have said they don't read comments. So
Right.
that was a big conversation to have with me. Just said, just don't do it, like, because it doesn't matter. They said, you're Beyonce, you're whoever, you go read comments on any single video, and you're going to find negative. It doesn't matter. There's nobody who has 100% perfect everything because this entire business, and I think what people forget too is it's subjective.
Right.
This is art. Not everybody likes romance movies. Not everybody likes sexy movies. Not everybody likes Hallmark movies. I mean, it's you're never going to please everyone. And so how I've gone into it is the mindset that like I always have to consider the source. And if someone is critiquing this and they have something negative to say, who are they? What type of films do they normally gravitate to? Where's the credibility in that? And does it match with what I was doing? Does that match this project? And
Mm.
I think that's kind of the best way to get through it is know that, I will not please everybody, but I'm not meant to. I did this for me.
Right.
I'm proud of it. I'm confident with it. I know it's good. I know it's great. And so it's just a matter of like of lining that up. I don't like a lot of the big Marvel movies that are out there right now, but some people love them. My review of that is not going to be the same as someone that loves it. And
Right.
so I have a very realistic viewpoint that this is the type of industry that is just very, very subjective and changing and trending and fleeting,
Mm.
and that it's never personal. It's never personal. It's just not. It just isn't.
Well, so when you say it's not personal, what exactly are you referring to when being not personal? Are you talking about just the fact that someone says, I just didn't like the movie, didn't work for me, or if they're attacking you directly, whether it be for your acting, whatever the case may be, like
Right.
you're not taking that personally, or are you just referring to the fact that critiques are critiques and therefore I'm not going to let it get to me? Like, I'm just curious about where that standpoint comes from for yourself.
It's really the mindset. It goes
Okay.
down to where it's coming from. For example, if I'm sitting there and I was like watching Love Venezia and I had one person to my left and one person to my right, both people watching that are having a different experience.
Right.
They're both bringing a different day that they had into it, a different week, a different childhood, a different experience
Mm.
entirely.
Right.
They're never going to be viewing, even though it's the same movie, nobody's viewing it with the same lens. And so for
Mm.
me, it's realizing that like it's not personal because if someone is offended by some of the sexual elements in this film, it may have something that has nothing to do with me, that has to do with their upbringing or their, religious views of what they grew up in. And then the
Right.
person to my right loves it and is raving about it and posting it everywhere. It doesn't mean that either person is right or wrong. And I think that's what a lot of the movie talks about is there's a lot of these deep discussions with the character Marco, where he talks about that right or wrong is subjective. So a lot of what you're asking me
Mm.
now is addressed in the film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, are you the type of person that goes back and revisits your work just to see how you've come along the way when it comes to when you first started, if it's available for you to check out, to where you are with yourself now as far as your acting and everything else is concerned. Like, do you ever go back and revisit some of your work? Or are you one of those actors that I see it once and once I'm done, I move on?
Yeah, no, I like to watch it. I like to
Really?
revisit it.
Okay.
I watch everything pretty frequently.
Really?
Yeah, for me, it's motivating. It's no
Okay.
matter what kind of voice is going on in your head or bringing you down, it's sort of a confirmation that, like, well, I'm booking, I'm working, people are hiring me, people are paying me to do this. So you
Mm,
quickly kind of like get rid of any of those negative thoughts because it's like it's all
interesting.
receipts. Like I'm working nonstop right now, so I have to give myself that pat on the back and take those moments to celebrate it because in this business, like I said, it's such a roller coaster that
Right.
if you don't celebrate each of those small victories, you will go insane. You'll go crazy.
That's very interesting. I think it's one of the most unique answers I've ever heard of with this question I've asked before. So when you look at your work, then I know you say you like to revisit it, but like, do you ever have like a critique standpoint as well too when you look at like, yeah, I could have done this a little bit better, or is it one of those situations for yourself when you look at a movie like, well, I wasn't as good, but I saw the potential that I was trying to go for, and now I know I've gotten better with X, Y, and Z. Like, do you have a little bit of that for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some moments I think we're always striving to, make each performance better. But I think what is important to also realize is that not every set and every time frame is the same. Sometimes when you're
Right.
on the set and you're shooting, you didn't get three takes of that. You didn't get to do that because it was a lower
Mm,
budget project or there were other crew elements or they were behind on schedule that day. Maybe this other scene that you did, you had all the time in the world to perfect it and do it. And so it's not an even playing field even when you watch your projects and
interesting.
scenes because it's not always the same environment. Like there are some scenes where you're doing where you're like even in Love Venezia where it was freezing cold and we're having this, intimate conversation outside and it's very lighthearted, it's freezing, you know what I mean? And so like nobody that's watching it has any idea like the
Right.
elements of some of these, situations that you're in. So I just look at it that way because I watch it and I'm really able to remember what exactly was happening for each specific scene. I have a very good memory. And so I'm like, oh yeah, well maybe I would have done that differently, but I remember it was so windy and I was freezing. It's something like that.
Have you ever worked on a project that you probably thought wasn't you, whether it be you thought you weren't that good in, or the project wasn't very good, and then when you saw it, completely blew you away? Like, oh, this is much better than I thought. Anything that comes to mind that sticks out for you in that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of projects. I think especially with plays like and
Okay.
theater too. Like when I've seen video recordings of that, especially because with film, it's like sometimes you watch on the monitor, you're able to see little snippets of things.
Hmm.
Sometimes we didn't on Love Venezia. We just we didn't, but a lot of the time you do. We were just go 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 go, so we didn't have time. We were in Venice and just only had a certain we had so many places to be, but in
Oh, I
general,
see.
yeah, I when I've watched some theater shows, that's been nice because you have no idea, there's nothing recorded, so you're just until you see like a recording of it, you don't really know how it's coming across. So there's been some where I'm like, I don't even know if I like this play, and I've watched it later and been like, I really liked it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump to something real quick because I didn't want to forget to bring this up here. So I was doing some research on you, and I listened to the conversation you had over a year ago. Then I came across two promos that you had done in your early 20s. The
Mhm.
first one, which was that back in 2010, and I wrote them down because I don't want to forget. It was something that you had done for Gennaro Farah Fitness,
Oh
where
my God. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God. So funny. Yeah.
So I saw that one, and then I came across another one when you were 23 back in 2013, where you did a promo for Ford Fusion Energy, and you talked about how your family grew up, where you grew up at back in Kansas City, having your family drive a lot of Ford vehicles and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I don't even remember that
Now,
one.
you don't remember that one at all? It's on
No,
YouTube.
no.
And you
Yeah.
actually,
No,
so
I'm
here's
I'm
here's
sure. Yeah.
so you had a full head of hair,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
were actually a lot more muscular in that
Yeah.
particular promo than
Yeah.
you were in
Yeah.
the previous one.
Yeah.
So so the reason I'm bringing this up here is because there was a question that I had when it comes to the things that you have done throughout your through when it became, because you came to out you I think you came to LA, in your teens or something like that, if I remember correctly, and then you
Yeah,
went to New York and so on and so forth.
sure.
So when you are when you're doing something like that, for example, I'm actually kind of curious about when it comes to the so I'm looking at that and I'm saying and I was wondering myself like how you prepared for something like this because when it comes to preparation for acting, there's and especially if you have the time, you take full advantage of it. You do a lot of you put a lot of investment to preparing for the lines, et cetera, et cetera. For something like this, on the other hand, you seem a little more nonchalant. I guess is the best way I could describe it, where you just kind of went with it. I don't know
Mhm.
if you remember any of the details there, but I was really curious about when it comes to someone saying, "Hey, we want you to speak for us about this particular product," and say what you will, say it at your leisure. But when you think about if you can remember that time, like what that experience was like for you, because I don't know if there was any sort of difference when it comes to a task that you are completing there that you feel some sort of satisfaction, or do you get more satisfaction when it comes to straight up acting or dancing or whatever the case may be? Because if someone's giving you a job, to me, you strike me as a person that I will do the absolute best. But I always wondered that if that thought process comes when acting, or in this case, I know you have done. I think you're still a real estate agent too, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Or you
I
might
still
be.
have that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. So you put a lot of investment to that sort of stuff. But for something like this, though, something about that it seemed a little interesting for me where you seem very cool about it. Didn't have any stress behind it, anything. It just seemed like you just talk very naturally about your upbringing and things you've experienced and what you've learned, et cetera, et cetera. But in doing something like that, though, is there kind of like the same mindset where you have where jobs at hand, the job that I need to do, I'm going to do to the best of my ability, and that's all I care about. But again, it might be a silly question to ask, but I hope you understand why I'm asking it for.
Yeah, no, I understand it. I think in many ways a lot of people subconsciously don't even realize, but we're acting every day. Um, like we cater ourselves to different situations every day. We speak differently in different environments, around different relatives, around all of that. And so I look at that work as the same way. Like when I do a commercial project, it's a side of myself that is more of my natural like fun funny cracking jokes, like very energetic vibe. And then I did this film which is much more my introverted and side of myself that's more emotional, that I don't always share with everybody. And that's why this film was great for me to have that outlet to be able to do that, because
Mhm.
within my family and friend circles, I'm actually the one who's making everyone laugh and making sure that everyone's having a good time. And in the past, they haven't maybe always said how I really felt about something. Um, and so that's why like this film was great for me to more tap into that side of it. But I think to answer your question, yeah, it's this element that every project I'm going to give 100% to, but it's going to be tapping into a different part of me to cater to whatever that project is. Like if I was doing something for Hallmark, it's going to be a different conversation than today. But they're all sides of me, and I'm an actor, and so I'm going to morph myself into bringing out the best for that specific situation that I'm hired for.
Do you get satisfaction when it comes to acting from completing the task? Like in other words, like you're playing the part, you put on the best performance you can, or do you get satisfaction with the other elements of it where you get a part, especially one like you really are very passionate about, you get the part. I'm sure there's satisfaction out of that. Or do you get satisfaction once everything's completed, once you see the final cut? Like I want to know where you feel like you peak once you have completed a job that you're for a production you're working on. Where does that come for you? Is it more the overall process or specific areas that you like into that you think you I guess the best way I could ask is where you connect the most with the set production.
Yeah, I think I really focus on each specific scene at a time. So after every single scene is done, it's almost like its own short film, its own mini movie. There's the beginning, there's the middle, there's the end.
Right.
There's a purpose of this specific scene. And so I go into it with the mentality mentality that like when I'm done with that specific scene, it's like check, like I've it's a reward. It's like I've completed that task, for the day.
Right.
I'm I'm on break now until the next shot. So
Right.
I do it in small increments where it's not necessarily like, oh, this entire project's done. It's each little scene is a victory. Now, with that said, when I did La Venezia and I was on the flight back to LA, that was an emotional time because for me, it's like I was so vulnerable through that entire process. And as somebody who, had dealt with like body elements of body dysmorphia
Right.
and had my heart broken so many times and, had some really down, dark times in terms of my love life and what that kind of did to me in many ways. It was so healing. And so when I was back on that flight, it was this mixture of a sadness that this all, that it was coming to an end, but it was
Mm.
also this sense of excitement and just I was so proud that I did it. And I was so proud of like what I presented and that I was able to not be jaded by those situations, but have an outlet to express it and to share it with the world and hopefully have people identify with that as well.
The projects that you said you worked on this past year, these all took place after Love Venezia. Is that when they all took place, or is this beforehand? This all that took place here.
So it's yeah, these the ones I'm talking about were directly within the months after Love
Okay.
Venezia. Yeah.
So when you completed that particular production there, um, going into the next set of roles, did you notice a big difference in yourself when it came to whether it be the preparation or the excitement or anything that probably maybe I'm not saying that you may have a different perspective, but more, I guess, in the sense like there's something new about you that you've noticed coming off of that project, rolling into these next set of projects here that I'm not sure if there's something different that you notice about yourself because of what you had experienced coming off of that particular project.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have noticed that I have a lot more like quick emotional accessibility. Like I'm able to tap into like those elements of myself a lot quicker. On cameras
Mm.
before it would kind of be, maybe a little bit more of a process because I hadn't done it. And then now it's almost like a band-aid that once I've done it's like been the most vulnerable you can be is having those sort of more intimate moments on camera
Mhm.
uh, that I'm like now I'm not really fazed by anything. I mean, I get the breakdowns or auditions, I look through the script and I'm like, that's nothing, because I've tackled a lot, you know what I mean? It's like it's yeah, like that's fine. I gotta shoot somebody, no big deal. Like it's nothing because people I don't think it was such a vulnerable thing to do, but
Right.
such a powerful, fun, rewarding thing to
Do you
do.
think the role changed you? That whole production, did it change you as a person, at least to some degree, where you looked at yourself more differently as opposed to how you viewed yourself beforehand? Like, do you feel
Yeah,
that about yourself?
I think so. I think in some ways I was always sort of afraid of doing something that was a little edgier, just out of fear of what other people
Right.
would think or say. And the fact when I gave myself permission to do this,
Right.
that's when I noticed that I was changed by that. It was very empowering to not feel like imprisoned by other people's thoughts anymore.
Mm,
Just to
sure.
have it be what I wanted and to know internally that like I'm still the kind-hearted guy from the Midwest. And like none of this changes that. None of the fact that I had, sex scenes in the movie or any of that. Like I'm still a good person. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it comes down to is like that
Right.
idea. Like I think sometimes we, think, oh, someone did this or that. It's like I'm just a human,
Right. Right.
and so for me, it was really giving myself permission that like yeah, nothing's like I'm a different person, but I'm only different in the way that I view
View
myself.
yourself and how you handle yourself. That's probably the biggest difference for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Explain to me then about. So I want to go back to the sex scenes then, because well, I'm sorry, you brought up the sex. I want to get into that. I meant to say when the first time you did it in preparation for that. how, because then you said before you've given yourself permission to be comfortable being
Mhm.
uncomfortable, if that makes any sense. But when you were actually going through with it, was it a lot to for you to get really comfortable in that particular moment for that first scene, if you will, or were you already well prepared and everyone discussed about the lead up to it and how it's going to be shot, how it's going to be laid out? Like, what was that process like for you, having done it the very first time? And then I would assume that after the that first particular section you shot, did it get easier as it could continue on with the production for yourself?
Yeah, well, the very first scene that we shot was this scene where I'm sitting on the bridge, and it's kind of an intimate romantic conversation.
Mm.
But it's outside, it's nothing sexual. But that was the very first scene that we shot, and I remember right after we shot that scene, there was like silence. And then I remember looking around, and every single crew member was in tears, every single one of them.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's because we all felt that like this is special. There's something here. Like this is we all felt that real meaning of the film. And so I think for me, once that all happened, I realized that everyone around me was on, I mean, I knew it, but to feel that everyone was on my side. Everyone believed in this story. Everybody wanted this to be great. And Alex, who plays my partner Marco in the film,
Mm.
we had such a natural chemistry that we had no idea how that was really going to go face to face. I mean, we had met virtually, we had done reads that way, but we had not met face to face. He was in Barcelona, so when once we actually did that, that was a big breath of fresh air because I trusted him after that first scene, and we really I think trusted each other, and it just made it very real. And we're like, okay, there's good intentions behind this
Right.
whole thing. This is special. And then we didn't actually do any of the sexual elements until the last couple days of filming. So those last couple days were
Interesting.
devoted entirely to all of those elements. So by then, we had built up such a natural bond and a natural, connection. You're in all kinds of elements out there having these experiences with someone. You're bound to develop a closeness and a
Right.
comfort with them. So I was really thankful that they did it that way, because then once that moment came, it there was such a comfort already with him. So I wasn't nearly as nervous to do that by that point.
So do you think if it was shot, let's say, not necessarily the other way around, but kind of like sporadically throughout the production, do you think your views would have changed, would have been slightly different from, having that first scene you guys shot together, everyone reacting the way they did, and then saving that till the very end of the production? Like, do you think your perception would have been slightly different if it had been kind of like more or less the beginning, middle, then maybe towards the end, all spread out like that?
I think so. Yeah, I think there would have been. I think you would have just picked on naturally onto some different like elements, and I think it
Hmm.
would have been. It still would have been great, but it just would have been a different flavor in the way that the scene played out, probably.
Hmm.
Whereas now they play it out with such a there's such a trust, like there's so much eye contact. That the way that it play, I mean, there's orchestral music playing, and it's just very passionate and heated that way, that there's nothing, vulgar about it. And I think before, in my mind, when I was imagining what some of these scenes might be just from the script alone, um, I didn't fully know like what to think of that. So I think I definitely would have, even though I trusted him, probably would have been a little more nervous as to where it would have gone. But by the time that we actually did it, I was like, let's dive in. Like we were so game. We were just ready to make this great thing happen.
So was that saved on purpose towards the end of production for those reasons to kind of get you guys really comfortable to develop that relationship for the characters, and then once you guys got to that point that the rest of it is just pretty much like second nature where you guys can just do it without being as nervous. It had to be done earlier or somewhere in the middle of the production. Was that kind of
I
the
mean, from
decision
my
from the very
understanding,
beginning?
it is. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
from what I remember the conversations to be, I think that was kind of it was a mixture of things, but I think that was a big part of it, was to just
Okay.
respect that be like a closed set with just us, the last bit of filming.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you first saw everything, like including the sex scenes as well too, like did you have any were you nervous, having seen that in the final cut? Like, oh, is this is going to be coming up? How did it turn out? Did you have perception about what you were expecting? And then when you saw it, were you, because you said you loved it, but I'm curious about like what your comfort level was at that point once you saw it and then walking away from it, having seen all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think before I first sat down to watch it, yes. No, once the film actually started to play and the way that it's edited and the way that it flows, I wasn't really worried about it at
Okay.
all. From that first shot of where, you know, I don't want to give it away, but like there's this element that's just this very touching sensual element that plays out, and it's just it's really beautiful on camera with the music, and it's very slow and it's passionate. And for me it was like, okay, this is two people in love. This isn't porn, you know what I mean? Like this is
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
this is two people who care
right,
about each other, and they are just ready to have this experience together. And when you think about that sort of element, like what, there's nothing there's nothing terrible about that. There's
right.
nothing bad about that. Like that's what people who care about each other do, you know.
How long were you guys in Italy for to shoot everything out there? Was it for like a short period of time, or was it just did you guys have all the time to be able to pull it off? Because from what you explained earlier, it seems like you guys didn't have a lot of time out there. It was just like once you got the shot done, move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think it was close to 3 weeks. I think
Oh,
it was like
really? Okay.
2.5, 3 weeks. So I think around that time frame, from what I remember. Um, Yeah, and then we shot a little under a week in LA prior with just some of the like the first scenes before I go to Venice.
When you went out there, was that your first time in Italy too?
That was my first time in Europe, period.
Really?
That was my
Okay.
first big international trip, so that was part of it too, and that was part of my pitch and my whole idea of this whole thing was just that so much of it is real. Mhm.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, when you were out there for the 2.5, 3 weeks out there, did you have time to explore around the area to kind of be able to get yourself acquainted with certain things about the city that I mean, apart from shooting, obviously, but did you have the time to be able to explore when you guys had the time to do so?
I mean, we did something where like every single lunch and every dinner we would sit in a different restaurant in a different part of the city. So we didn't cater it or anything like that.
Mm,
He wanted our experience to be very authentic there together as a crew. So we would always take the time to sit down at some restaurant around wherever we were sitting, and kind of take in the sights and the culture and explore. So I didn't really have time outside of the shoot, but we were shooting all over, Venice, and we just walked so much. As you know, I mean, I'm sure you know, there's no cars right there. It's all these
yeah,
cobblestone.
yeah,
So you're walking in the cold because we were shooting this, when it was cooler temperatures, and so we were. Yeah, we just walked everywhere together. We were like holding hands in the wind and rain sometimes, and it was flooding some of the times.
really?
The high tide that sort of
Oh, okay,
happened.
okay, okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty frequent there.
interesting.
So there, yeah. So we explored a lot. I mean, we shot in all kinds of conditions on bridges where there's people actively trying to pass us, and we would have to cut and then time it right. And even though we had permission and we
Right.
were doing it in these certain spots, you can't help day-to-day life in a city like that. And so it was an adventure just to focus.
So for you, was the hardest thing about the production, especially over there, was it just being able to, I guess, we trying to keep the momentum for the scenes, like because you talked about the weather elements out there, people walking around, trying to you guys have permission and you were able to shoot without any trouble, but someone is not going to know there's what's going on around the corner. So for you, for all of you, I guess for you specifically, what was the hardest thing for you all to have to deal with when it comes to the production itself? Um, that you remember that I guess if when you look back at it, you think, as tough as it was, as difficult it may be, but we did the best we could. And then when you saw the final cut, you realize like that's even better than I anticipated. Like, do you have a little bit of that? And when you think about it, watching it and thinking about how difficult certain things were, in the production during that period there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's bigger than I imagined, when
Okay.
you start really seeing it. Yeah, for sure. It's pretty spectacular up on the big screen. Just you just catch so many more details. You can see each little drop of water in the eyes. It's such a different thing than just watching it on your little phone or on the monitor or anything like that. It was huge. It was so much better than I had even imagined that it would look like.
So was this your first time traveling outside the United States, from what I'm
Except for
understanding?
Mexico, I had been to like
Okay.
Puerto Vallarta and a few other places like on a cruise, but never. I don't even know if that counts, But yeah, I've never been to Europe. I always wanted to, and I
Right.
actually going to, right before the COVID shutdown happened, and then I didn't get
Right.
to. This was great. What a fun way to do it to go shoot something.
How was the cuisine over there? Like, was the food very good? Because I
Oh
heard
yeah.
a lot of great things about Italian food over there. That's just nothing compared to what it is over here.
It's great. Yeah, it's
Okay.
so good. Everything just tastes so fresh. You never feel like you can eat as much pasta as you want and you never feel bloated there or anything. Like it's
Really?
weird. Everything's just natural, There's
Did
no
you lose weight with the food over
yeah,
there?
yeah. Because
Yes.
I mean, we were walking. First of all, we were walking around so much
Right.
everywhere. We had so much time, and then yeah, I think we were all losing weight. But yeah, no, the food was great, and the coffee is really, really good. That was pretty special too.
So food wise over there, what was actually apart from I'm assuming the pasta is one of the better things out there, but like what was one specific meal that you had out there that when you left, you realized I wish we have this here in the States?
Yeah, so I, being, who I am and how I was like brought up, I would go and I'd be like, I'm gonna order this spaghetti or the lasagna or just like the easiest, thing that would be what would be on the menu. And I would always get challenged. So like Steve and some of the other cast members, Alex, who plays Marco, would say, no, 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 try this, try that. And so there's this dish, it's cuttlefish. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
Mm.
I never heard of it here, so I'm assuming it's just I think it's only in Venice. I think it's like the fish that's there, it's like only around from what I remember, it's like only around that area.
Mm.
But yeah, that was a really good dish. That was pretty special. It's called cuttlefish, and it's just a very smooth tasting fish.
So how do they cook it? Like they smoke it or they I mean, I'm assuming they don't barbecue it. So like what exactly are they doing that made it so specifically good
They
for you?
mix it like in with the pasta sauce, so I
Oh,
would have
really? I didn't know that. Oh,
cuttlefish
okay.
pasta. Yeah, so it would be like this creamy, almost like mushroom, like sort of texture that was smooth within the pasta. So
Oh.
yeah, it's almost like a chili or a soup or something within the pasta. I really liked it.
So did you guys shoot this last year or was this something that was shot earlier this year? Because I think I saw in the social media post that Susanna posted up there, but again, I don't remember the exact time from when you guys had shot this film. So was it fairly recently or was it sometime last year that you guys had shot this?
We shot this primarily in November.
Okay.
Yeah, so November and yeah, I think the very last like couple days of October all the way throughout like all of November.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you were there, I guess my question is more about because I've one thing that I've heard with a lot of actors that talk about the experience of being able to visit the place that they're in the real environment and therefore it helps with a lot of things when it comes to performance or whatever the case may be. But when the first time you landed there and you saw where you guys are going to be shooting and how it's going to be laid out, did you feel like it actually helped in some way or shape or form with the authentic performance that you wanted to give for the character? Like, do you have a little bit of any sort of feeling like once you were there that it made you realize that this is I don't know what's the best way I could describe it with the question, but did it help you in any way to get get the right, I guess, mode or mood, if you will, for the part? Because I mean, this question may not come out as well as it did in my head, but I'm hoping you understand where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helped the mentality going into it and like setting the zone and just the atmosphere for sure.
Right.
It definitely helped with that, but it's a different thing to allow yourself to do that with a camera in your face and a crew of people. So even though people are like, "Oh yeah, some of those things are real," I'm like, "Yeah, of course," but you're aware of, things like it's still you still have to be very in tune with just letting yourself be, basically giving yourself permission to experience all of those things in an authentic way, just very exposed. And so for me, it was kind of having those moments and letting myself, like, I would almost like pause my thinking. Like sometimes I'd be like, wow, this is really cool. But I'm like, no, 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 wait, don't think about it yet. And then like when they would say action, like then let myself really explore it more, kind of a thing.
Oh, I see. I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself kind of like a method actor at any point when it comes to some of your performances? When you do you have any some of that kind of preparation where you have to be in a certain mood for, in this case, let's say for like some more of like the emotional beats, like do you prepare to, like, do you carry that emotion leading up to the scene and then after the scene in case if you have to reshoot it again or continue on with the scene? Like, do you have any of that, any of that kind of like acting process for yourself, or is it just whatever the moment is required, focus on that. Once I'm done, I'm moving on.
I mean, there's like a day-to-day like mood preparation. I'm definitely not, method in the aspect that I don't believe in letting it like take over your entire, life before you get there and after and all of that.
Mm.
But I think definitely like as I'm getting ready for the day and preparing, that there's a switch that happens, that just a certain mentality to tap into for whatever that scene is, for sure. And
Right.
sometimes there's some spillover that you can't help. I mean, if you do a very emotional scene, no matter, if you do it right and you do it authentically, you are a human being. So you're going to afterwards still have some of that for a bit until you snap out of it. But no, I've gotten very good at just being able to sort of like, okay, now I'm zoning into this and then letting myself release from that later. But
Have
that's
you
that's
ever?
probably the healthier way to do it, because as we know from several actors who have done method, it
Yeah,
doesn't turn out the best way.
true.
Yeah, yeah.
So for yourself though, like when when you're looking at a role, what specifically are you looking for? Apart from the fact you're connecting with the project and the part, but what specifically are you looking for when you are, um, whether it be auditioning or if someone's considering for a part, like what exactly are you looking out for when it comes to a part that you may be interested in partaking the production? Like what's the one thing that you look for now, maybe before you didn't think about looking into, where now things have changed or you might have a little different perspective about what's more important for you as an actor to pursue in a set project?
I think it's like finding layers within the script. I mean, a lot of the times you'll look at these projects and the script might be very, oh, you're the bad guy, or oh, you're the guy. I mean, it's everything's just very stereotypical and commercialized. And I think that I used to kind of look at some of that and be like, ah, I just want something more complex. And what I've sort of learned is that you can take those and then for yourself just make those choices to add those in, like they don't have all that on paper, but like me as the actor, my job is to sort of present something that maybe you didn't think of. So now it's almost like this game and this challenge where I look at different scripts and I'll be like, this is very one-dimensional character. What can I do to flip the script? So like for example, if I'm having an audition scene and it's like an argument scene, right? Everybody turning in that tape is going to be yelling like all day. I'm going to do it whispering, where like we're somewhere where we have to be quiet and like I don't want anyone to know,
Mm,
but like I'm pissed off at you. You know what I mean? Like
I see what you're saying.
making those little choices as an actor that are giving yourself permission to play, because essentially these scripts are, they're not always as set in stone as everyone thinks. And maybe words are, but the conditions of it are, they're an idea. It's a guide, it's a presentation, but
Right.
ultimately you are the actor. So what you're presenting to it is your own take, a perspective of a flavor that you're offering of what it could look like. And so for me, switching that gear is sort of looking at it and going like, what can I do to make this that much more interesting? And when I was a villain recently, it was like I didn't play it in that very stereotypical way. It's that I'm going to smile to your face and then I'm going to talk shit about you right when you leave, kind of a thing. And making that choice and like
Right.
just being very entitled and almost like that influencer that could be a villain sort of a
Mm.
mentality rather than just I'm gonna, chop your head off. Like it's more complex than that. And that's where the fun comes as an actor for
Do
me.
you have like a favorite film or actor that really like epitomizes like what you love about films or the or TV shows or the industry in general? Like, do you have something that comes to mind when you look at a film or TV show or like or again an actor that you think of like this is why I do what I do because what they do represent everything that I believe in.
Yeah. I mean, I think American Psycho, Christian. My last name is Bateman, so I
Right,
think there's
right,
always been. I was always like teased about that in some way, so it was
right.
natural that I would sort of, dive into that. And I really feel that that performance is a lot of those elements. Like it's terrifying, but it's
Mm,
also comedic. You know what I mean?
mm.
It's also crazy. It's also so outlandish and avant-garde. And I think that's a perfect example of like taking something that maybe on paper just would have been really terrifying and unsettling, but having it actually be really entertaining and interesting. And that's what I try to do as an actor.
So are you talking about like the whole film in general or just Christian Bale's performance of Patrick Bateman that really stuck out for you?
I think it's an element of both. I mean, the
Okay.
performance itself, though, too, is very much that. But also in the editing of the film, I think they do a
Yeah.
great job at sort of with that kind of adding those moments that might be perceived as like a little funny and just keeping it light at some sections where it could have just been dark, 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 dark,
Right.
you know.
So is that
But
considered to be your favorite movie or just one of the films that you look at as like I
I
said
wouldn't
before?
say no, it's not my favorite movie. My
Okay.
favorite movie is Moulin Rouge.
Really?
Yeah, I just think it's very visually stunning.
Yeah.
It's edited so well. It
Yeah, I
looks great,
agree.
sounds great. Um, I think it's just very innovative and different than most things that we see.
So Moulin Rouge being your favorite. So are you a fan of Baz Luhrmann as a director as well too because of what you have seen because of that
I
movie?
wasn't, that's the funny part is I wasn't as much, and now after that movie, then obviously I was more so. But I, in general, like prior to that, I wasn't.
Okay.
No.
So
Yeah,
did you by chance happen to check his latest film Elvis? Like, have you seen that movie?
yeah, yeah.
What did you think of it?
I liked it. I thought it was pretty authentic. I thought it felt real. I think it was
Did
good.
you feel like it was a lot of just what's the word I want to use? Because I remember when I saw the movie, it was just like so fast paced and there was just like a lot of jarring back and forth, at least for me. You never felt that at all about the film, like how quickly it moved and how things were just kind of like almost I don't know what's I guess I can't find the words for it, but it's like it it just seemed like it was a very rapid story that took 2.5 hours, which I didn't feel it 2.5 hours, but once I was done with it,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
exhausted by it. You understand where I'm coming from with
I
that?
can understand that for sure. Yeah, it was a lot of like some whiplash in there,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
back
yeah,
and forth
yeah,
elements. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it was shot well. I think the
yeah.
performances were great. So I was more looking at it, I think from that perspective. But I see what you mean. And I think so much of these films comes down to editing, and
Right.
how you can give the best performance in the world, but how it's edited and comes
Mhm.
together, it's really in their hands at the end because they can chop and make whatever they want from it.
Do you look at the industry now when it comes to so for example like when you're going for auditions or you're looking at projects are you do you look at the industry now in the sense of like how maybe beforehand when you were first starting that I mean it sounds like you got pretty lucky with some projects that you got to work on with theaters and whatever else but once you start looking at the roles that you're looking to audition for or roles you're getting here, does your perspective change about how you look at the opportunity? So what I mean by that is that if you're given in this case, you're love Venezia. Am I saying that right? I always thinking of
Venezia,
Venezia.
yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So when you're taking this part here and you look at the role, you look at the role, you enjoy, you've had a wonderful experience with it. Once you're done with it, do you look at it as a, I know I talked about it before and I asked you before and you answered my question, but I think I'm kind of more leaning towards the side of like when you're auditioning for something or when you're looking at a part, do you look at yourself as a way to, I guess, what's the best way I could describe it? do you look at it from purely an artistic standpoint, like I I'm connecting under these elements here, or do you still have a little bit of like the business side of it as well too? Because we've brought it up before, but the reason I'm bringing it up again and want to delve more into here with you is because this is a business,
Mhm.
and in order for you to be able to sustain yourself, you have to keep putting yourself there out there like that. But it's a grind, and you mentioned before that if you're in it because you want to make it, you want to do it for money, you're in the wrong business. But if I mean, you can make money, but if you are doing it for those reasons, it's not going to work out for you. So having to go through this whole process for yourself now, do you have a little bit of a business mindset about how you're going to network with people to be able to get some awareness for yourself, or do you have, or you still kind of just going by day, whatever's the best opportunities, I'm going to take that, and then whatever comes out of it, it is what it is.
I think once I sort of know the path a little bit of where this is going to go festival wise and distribution wise and things like that. I mean, then from then, I mean, it's probably going to be at a point where I will need to have a publicist, a PR person, and
Right.
somebody who specifically can, help with that side of things. Because I mean, I think actors sort of try to do it all, and it's pretty difficult. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to 95% of the industry now is self-taping, so it's virtual. So it's you at home, you know, just doing it. You're not going into the audition room anymore. And I think a lot of people don't know that. But
Yeah.
since COVID, primarily you're never really face to face. So you send these auditions sort of just out into the world and you don't know if it was watched or like in what order they watched it or any of it, like you just you don't know, so that's why it sort of becomes a numbers game. So that's where the business side of that I think is, yeah, I've definitely become a little more selective about what I put my time into and what a pay rate might be or any of that, because you do have to, because it is a lot of time. And especially now as I'm building up a lot of momentum, I have a lot more people reaching out just naturally from different projects and things, and
Hmm.
I have to just be a little more selective on what makes sense. Or but yeah, if I really believe in something, I'm usually up for doing it if I can make it work. But it is a business, like you said, and so you really do have to think about that. But I'll get to a point soon where I'm gonna have to have some help with that side of things.
So
Yeah.
in preparation for the stuff that's coming down the pipeline here for you, are you having to say no a lot more as a result of some things that are being presented to you, or opportunities that are you're looking to see that you can kind of get your hands on, and in order for you to get those opportunities, you're going to have to say no to them, with the possibilities that whatever you're attempting to get here may not come to fruition for one reason or another. So there's a little bit of a risk factor there, which is pretty much for
Yeah.
everything you're approaching here with. But are you having to say a lot more no's now as a result of the way things are going for you because of what you've experienced in the last year and a half?
Yeah, I mean, I just because time frame wise, a lot of projects overlap, and
Right.
if a certain project is asking you to keep a 2 week time frame open for something that may shoot for 1 or 2 days, it's really hard to commit to those 2 weeks if they don't give you a set date of when something is, when you've got other projects that are kind of in the mix too. So it does become very difficult to manage those commitments sometimes, because actors are usually the last ones to know
Yeah.
what your call time is, what date is happening, like we're really the people I think most, I didn't even know that before I was in the business, but we sometimes, like, we will know just a few days before and be like, hey, come in on we're having you come in on Thursday, and it's very last minute sometimes. Yeah.
What's the biggest hurdle that to this day that you go through that um you feel is probably a detriment to the whole process for yourself when it comes to whether it be auditioning, getting a gig, working on a project? Is there something that sticks out to you that's something you don't enjoy at all about more or less the industry, or just the actual process in itself when it comes to preparation, whatever the case may be? Is there anything that sticks out for you that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's social media. That's a huge thing. I just get very it's become such a big part of
Yeah, yeah,
actor and your overall brand that you're sort of forced into it.
yeah,
And it's not something I particularly enjoy.
yeah.
I just think it's a lot of there's a lot of fake things, online, and there's just a lot of, oh, my life's perfect, and it's just, I just, as an actor, I don't really like that part of it because for me, it's like I respond more to people who are just being vulnerable and transparent and not acting because not everything is perfect all the time. That's not real
Yeah.
life, and I think that's the biggest thing is just that so much of the industry now they're looking at like your follower count
Yeah.
and different things like that that have nothing at all to do with your performance or your audition or uh,
Have
any of
you
it.
have you ever been turned down for something because you didn't have a following that they were? Oh,
Oh, many
really?
times. Oh, many
So,
times.
but
Yeah.
what was the so is it are they looking at a certain amount of numbers that would would get them to say yes, you're perfect for the part, despite the fact that maybe you're. I'm not saying you're not. I'm talking about you, of course, but I'm
Right.
just saying like if someone is auditioning for a part, they get the part because they have over 1 million followers on social media, whatever it is. Are they looking at a certain number to get you for them to see that you're qualified for the part that you're wanting to audition for, or like what's the standard for them when it
And
comes to
it's
that?
different with every project. There literally have been breakdowns recently where it'll say only submit if you have 300,000 plus
Oh,
followers.
really? I didn't know that.
There are some that do say
Wow.
that specific kinds of projects, yeah. Now there are a lot of others where it's just sort of something that maybe they don't want to say that's what it is, but it can come down to that where, for example, if you are pinned, which is the term that's used, so you're like a final selection where they check with you on certain dates. They tell you to keep those dates open. You're a final selection. So that could be there's three of you, there's five of you, you don't really know, but you're in that final mix of people and then you're pinned. And what happens then, I think, is where it comes into play the most. So it's like, okay, we have five people who we think could play this. Maybe one is better than the other in terms of performance, but this other one has 2 million followers. We're going to go with the 2 million follower person. And it comes I think, into the negotiating part. Where then it's not about performance anymore. I think that's more of the more common answer for it, I think.
So do the people behind the scenes really believe maybe it's because I don't necessarily see how that would actually make the film any better or bring up the box office numbers, if you will. But
Yeah.
do they really believe that if you were to have over 500,000 followers on your social media, whichever platform you use, that they believe that we can get Daniel Bateman to work with us here because he's got over 500,000 followers on social media. Therefore, our numbers for the box office or whatever the case may be will go up even that much further. Like, do they really believe that's the case there?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of people behind the scenes, certain producers are not necessarily always like artistic people. They're more just on the
Business.
business sides of things.
Yeah.
And so they're just looking at it by numbers and by graphs and statistics and not always thinking of that part of it. And so I think it's important to challenge that sometimes because I don't think it translates how some people think that it does. I don't
Yeah.
think that because you have 1 million followers or 2 million that all of a sudden everyone's going to your film or anything. I Because online content, social media content is such a short form different thing. It's quick, it's on the go. It's not that I'm going into a movie theater to sit there and watch it. So I don't think it translates how people think that that it does. I think sometimes they're thinking also in terms of like product placement, things like that, other numbers to get involved. So I understand it from that business perspective, but I just don't think it really, most of the time, from what I've seen in my experience, it hasn't really helped the project. If the project isn't good, it still won't be good with 2 million followers.
Do you think that's a detriment though in the long term when it comes to how, because obviously the business is evolving when it comes to, because back in the day, star power was a big thing. You put Sylvester Stallone in a movie, he'll sell it, or at least back in those days. But not so much now. Because I've noticed that, like, I'm going to use this as an example with our channel here. I remember my son was, he's big into like online video gaming and whatnot, and I don't know half. I'll be none of these people who are online gamers, YouTubers, whatever else. Like majority of them, I did not. I've heard names of them. I didn't know who they look like, and so on. So in our channel, some of our guys got to interview some of those YouTubers who are online gamers or whatever else. When I mentioned that to my son, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna get like thousands of views or whatever it is." And not that our channel is super big or anything like that, but if we get a couple thousand, we're pretty happy with it. But when I was telling him that, and again, I can't remember half these guys' names are, but when I was telling him who was going to be on the channel for these interviews, he's like, "Oh, that's going to help you bring up your numbers." And I was like, "Oh, great, that's fantastic." Didn't do shit for us.
Yeah.
I remember it was like, what in the world are these people thinking that, because having that experience made me realize that none of this even works at all. You can't depend on like some YouTuber who has like 40 million subscribers and whatever how many is on social media coming onto our channel and saying a bunch of stuff that they're working on. And all of a sudden, boom, our stock goes up. Doesn't work at all. So I feel like that's a detriment where, they're the quality, I'm not saying they're not good quality, but the quality of the person's I guess brand doesn't translate to, quality for the other channels they're being on and so on and so forth. So when you're seeing that for yourself, do you feel a little more I'm not saying resentment, but do you have some sort of emotions behind that where, you know, I I know I have to build a brand, I have to work hard and have to get myself out there, but I'm not doing under those circumstances. But because I'm not doing those circumstances, it's hurting me because I could have gotten these parts, but I don't have the followers. Therefore, they're getting the opportunities. When I saw the movie, maybe it was great, maybe it was sucked, who knows? But when you're seeing that for yourself, what do you feel inside now and see how the business side of it here is looking at those figures where they think putting them there, all of a sudden the stock will go up for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's actually looking at the receipts and the statistics. Like I'll actually try to challenge that. Sometimes I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, if they had this sort of a following, did it really build that engagement? And kind of like looking for that. And 90% of what I found, it didn't. Like you said, it really it wasn't that. And I think a lot of the time it's because sometimes things go viral because it's like it's a quick thing. They'll watch like a portion of your interview or something, and it'll just be like in their feed. It'll be like a meme or a segment,
Mhm.
but they don't necessarily know who the person in that is, or they're not specifically like, thinking about that. I've been in like several videos recently, or from the soaps that I've done, or everything, where they have huge followings, like hundreds of thousands, regular people who watch them. My name isn't anywhere. Do you know what I mean? But I'll go to these things and I'll see it. I'm like, oh, there I am. There's my face. There's me doing that scene. And people are like, oh, I love it, this and that. But it's not translating to my specific following or my brand because I mean, I think sometimes people look at it as like you did the work, you were hired, we paid you, you did the job, but it's sort of a thing that needs to get worked out in the industry. I think is that it's an etiquette thing, and it's the right thing to do is to always credit the people in any video that you're in. Give everybody the put everyone's handle that's involved or whatever you can, because everybody that's put the work in deserves to be recognized for it. Or yeah.
Do you think in time that will change though when it comes to how where just because you have a large following on social media or on YouTube that they will realize that it doesn't translate to bigger numbers for us. Like just like as of this recording just recently where we've had Deadpool and Wolverine come out and did a big number. So there's a huge fan
Yeah,
base
yeah.
out there for that. And of course, they expected the movie to do very well because the right people that were involved in the previous two films were still involved with this one, and the consistency is still there with the quality. So that had a very big following, which got bigger and bigger with each and every film. But then again, you look at a movie like, for example, like Borderlands, which, is a big video game that came out. I think the last one came out like in 2019, and this movie was announced 10 years ago, whatever it was. Now it's just released, even though it was shot a couple of years ago, and did absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
So the fluctuation of the business where it's just either it's ebb and flow. Some things are going to be a hit that you don't expect. Some things that you expect to be a hit are not a hit at all, for whatever those reasons may be. You would think that the people behind the scenes would know better, that they have to take a gamble and the risk is, what is what it is at the end. Do you think that the right people, if in charge, that understand that will be in charge in running things behind the scenes, where they understand that we can't depend on those numbers being the reasons for why we think the boxes will go up the way it will? Um, do you think we'll ever get to that point where smart people will actually take control of the situation and make smart decisions to allow the right people to to work on the projects to get the right to tell the best story possible. Do you think we'll ever get to that point, seeing from your side of it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think with the younger generations that will, start to take over some of those positions like over time, I think we'll have a better understanding. I still think overall social media is still pretty new when you think about it in
Yeah,
terms of the world. And I grew up at a time where it like it was when I was a teenager and everything, it was all kind of just starting,
yeah.
and there was Zanga and MySpace and all
You
of
said
those.
Zanga? I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. That was my like when I was a teenager, like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
what I had. And then I'm like that generation where we were just sort of thrown into it, where all of a sudden, like we had to learn what is the etiquette on there. Like there's no manual on this, and there's no anything. And how does this all work? And I think over time, as we're developing more and more of an understanding on like human behavior with social media, I think it will get better in terms of knowing what to do with it and what
Okay.
makes sense over time. In terms of just going back real quick to like when you talked about the idea that like will doing something that has some sexual content or something like that change things for you or the way anybody thinks. I always reflect back to the idea that like let's think of how is Kim Kardashian famous? How are,
Yeah.
a lot of these certain people that are out there? Sylvester Stallone, we all know what he did in the beginning as an actor before everything else. There's a
Yeah.
lot of scenarios where we're like, we excuse things for certain people when we want to. And
Yeah.
they've
True.
allowed that to happen for certain people. And it becomes very hypocritical because it's like, oh, so and so did this or that when
Yeah.
someone else did the exact same thing. So I think it's just important to highlight, that aspect of it. It's like it's not always an even playing field of like what we expect from certain people based on their network or whatever it is.
I'm really curious to ask you this question about how the culture in the industry has changed a lot when it comes to, for example, like representation.
Mhm.
Because you, you being a gay man,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if for yourself in the beginning when you first started, did you notice a big difference about how gay characters, gay actors have been treated going through the audition process, whatever else? Have you seen a major difference about how things are have changed when it comes to how people view the community, if you will, when it comes to how actors, gay actors, lesbians, whatever the case may be, they're getting these parts that probably they would have never gotten years beforehand, but now are getting these parts. Now they're getting opportunities, which is a great thing. But I always wondered that I'm not going to say who said this to me, but I'm gonna. This is the reason why I'm asking this question for you. But I had someone a while back tell me that when they were booking for parts, they were told by a particular agency that we would love to hire you to represent you, but you're white. We have
Mhm.
to hire more people of color, sexual
Mhm.
backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right.
And I get all that. But at the same time, I'm wondering when it comes to the way the industry has changed, which I think, again, is a good thing. But I wonder if there was always an element of like, well, this is what's happening right now. Therefore, we have to cater to this. And I hope
Mhm.
that when I say it doesn't sound like I'm coming off the wrong way. That's not the case at all. But I'm very curious for yourself going through that motion of seeing the industry change from when you first started to where you are with it now. Um, do you feel like the aspect of telling an authentic story, in this case being a gay love story, if you will,
Mhm.
that it comes from a pure standpoint of like, this is the story that we want to see. It's a good story. There's authenticity behind it. At the same time, we're bringing people who are of that background as well too, that can help tell that story and add their own elements to it to be able to, flesh it out a little better, et cetera, whatever the case may be. Do you notice that there's a little bit of a more either a positive change or a slow change, or maybe there's a negative but turned positive? Like, I want to know what your experience is like seeing that from more or less behind the closed doors, if you will.
I mean, I definitely feel that the industry has changed a lot that way in terms of like quotas,
Right.
diversity quotas and things like that. And like you said, there's many positive aspects of it, but it also does, I think, get in the way sometimes of just the artistry itself and like where does the actor, come into that mix? Like, are they being judged because of their they're acting at that point, or is it just sort of like you need to be this, and this?
Right.
And I think that can get a bit tricky, I think, sometimes in the industry. And it's something that I definitely have noticed and that I've seen and lost, projects for just trying to meet certain quotas for things. And
Mm.
yeah, I think the intention is good, but I don't think it's always executed in a way that is always beneficial for certain projects or things. I think sometimes I think it's like you never want to force it. I think sometimes like you
Yeah.
should have an open mind and let different actors of different backgrounds like try things
Like
and
organically in a situation like that. Yeah. Okay.
right. I mean, I would like to see more of that, but I mean, I'm glad there's a lot of diversity in projects and things
Right.
now. It is tricky because as a gay actor, it's the diversity aspect is interesting because it's not always the most visible form of diversity. It's different in terms of like it's only diverse if I think to a lot of these networks and companies, if it's like a very stereotypical gay
Mm.
stereotype,
Yeah.
or if it's a certain thing where it's like, every
I know what you
day,
mean. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah. It's like like you can just be a dude who happens to be gay. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think a lot of the times like that gets mixed is like I would like to see a little bit more of that. That's just like, no, the random guy sitting next to you at the coffee shop or at the gym might be a gay man,
Yeah.
and it's not always this visible thing that people I think sometimes have conditioned themselves to think like it's always something that you just know. and
Right.
and some for some it may be, and that's fine. But it's not everyone.
Have you ever seen a movie that, or TV show for that matter, where you saw something that, whether it be, it could be a gay character, a gay movie, or some sort of a variance of a diversity background with people that we probably normally don't get to see. But when you saw it, not once did you ever think of black guy, white guy, Chinese guy, or gay man or transsexual, whatever the case may be. Like you just saw it for what it was, loved it, or maybe hated it, but you saw it for what it was, and not once did it ever cross your mind about, well, I got to see this gay actor or this person, so on and so forth. Like, does there a project that comes to mind when you watch them for what it is, and not once did you ever think about all the other elements that nowadays, where it's like we need more of this to represent this minority of groups or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know what that film. I'm sure it's happened. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, lately, I think it's been more that I've looked at it. When you're an actor, you watch these things from a very sometimes you have to be careful about that because you kind of get into the business zone and you're like, I should just enjoy this and just
Right.
take it for what it is, not like sit there and think of, well, who cast this and who did this and I mean, just watch the movie. And we're looking at it from a different perspective. But no, that's a good, interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Is there an actor or actress that you are, let's say you became, whether it be a fan of or respect a great deal, whatever the background is, that when you saw their work and you realize that they can do anything and everything, and I love them for what they're capable of doing, whether they are gay or straight, some sort of different ethnicity background, but when you saw them, you realize that they were good purely because they were good.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought Neil Patrick Harris was really good with his characters, not just because he was gay, but
Right.
he's like element of like he's had a pretty diverse career,
Yeah.
roles like that. So he's one. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a few. I think in terms of like let's see, Matt Bomer is another one recently who's
Yeah.
done a lot of like great work, I think, recently. And he's played gay characters. He's also played straight characters recently.
Yeah.
And I think he's been able to balance that really well. And yeah, it's interesting seeing how that plays out into the modern world compared to 30, 40 years ago. It's nice when you get to see that mix a bit more.
Are you comfortable playing? So I guess my question really is focusing on, like, when you're playing a part, like, do you feel comfortable playing characters that are completely opposite of you? So, for example, like you played a villain recently.
Yeah.
Um, is there something about that particular character that was completely unlike you that attracted you to for you to play something that's more or less out of your comfort zone, or maybe it was something that you liked, you wanted to try that you're not like in real life, but you get to play something that you never will ever get to play in real life, if you will. But I mean, I hope you understand what I'm going with this
Yeah,
question
no,
here.
I love the challenge. I love kind of I mean, if you just played like what everyone, stereotyped you as the whole time, it would never be, any fun. I love to find what that means to me. And I think it's like, okay, if I'm playing this villain, what is my version of that? And villains are, if we don't stereotype it, villains come in many different shapes and
Right.
forms. There could
Yeah.
be someone on social media, like I said, who's an influencer who acts like everything's perfect and writing these amazing affirmations, but really behind the scenes is, verbally abusive to their wife at home, or you know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of scenarios there of what a villain could look like. So for me, I enjoy finding those things because for me, it's like, yeah, it's been kind of finding it in more of that manipulative way and like using sort of this persona to my advantage of like you can still smile and you can be a villain in a person who's smiling next to you in line at the grocery store,
So apart from I forgot your character's name. Forgive me. Who you played in Love Venice? I keep
Michael.
Michael. Thank you. Apart from this character you play, what was another role that you played that really like where you felt maybe it changed you and it changed you in a much more positive light where maybe you looked at yourself a lot more differently. So is there anything that comes to mind apart from that character that really changed your perspective on how you look at certain things or look at yourself that has stuck with you up to this point?
Yeah, when I did the play Gently Down the Stream in Palm
Okay.
Springs, that was one because that was at a point where I was living in Palm Springs for a few years and I was building my real estate business there. And I did that because I was getting burnout on the entertainment industry. I was so
Mm.
tired of the ups and downs and the game of it all,
Right.
that I just said, I'm going to go do something else. And so I did, and I was doing all of that. And that play, the way that it sort of happened was kind of like organically from conversation with Terry Ray, who was in it. And I that's sort of what got me back into it. That's sort of the thing that I did that again, and I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I miss this. I do it because I love it, and so that changed it for me because I was getting ready to completely say goodbye to it. I think I was ready to just make a completely new life for myself. I almost had resentment for it just from the roller coaster of it. Even though I was doing well, it was like it's never enough. There's always more you
Mhm.
could be doing. And so I was like, I don't know if this is a good way to live. So I went and then I did that for a while, and it provided comfort, and it was good, and it was rewarding for the time, but it wasn't my passion. And when I got back on stage again and doing that role, it really reminded me of like why I do it and the fact that I'm good at it, and that this is a gift that I have that I want to use, and that I've worked my entire life to do this. So I probably, wouldn't be doing this right now in this moment had that play not happened.
So you think if that never came about at all, that you would still be in real estate 100% all the way through, or at least up to this point?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I would be here in LA doing this right now. I think that's sort of what gave me permission to step back into it. And then the movie, that with Love Venezia is what really solidified that, because that's when
Mm.
I'm like, okay, now I'm the lead in a film like this. Everything that I've worked for is sort of finally coming into fruition here. It's the universe saying like, hey, let's turn the wheel back around and go back to the industry. You're not ready to leave yet.
Do you believe things happen for a reason?
I do, yeah. I
Why do you
think so.
believe that?
Why do I believe that?
Hmm.
Um, because when I look at the track record of like my entire life and how everything has happened, I do think everything happened for a reason. I think a lot of the heartache and the hurdles that I have gone through provided me the ability to know what that feels like, and as an actor, the ability to tune into those emotions. How would I ever know what it feels like to, have my heart broken if I've never had it, And
Hmm.
I think there's just a lot of those elements that, like, all of those things that I specifically went through, they've all molded me into, the person that I am. And I'm a very sensitive person. And so that makes me have this ability to, I think, tap into all of that. And um, I used to hate the fact that I was sensitive. I used to, when I would date people, I'd be like, why is this bothering me so much? And I'm in tears, and the other person just doesn't even care. Is just able to snap their fingers and be out of the relationship tomorrow and like ghost me. And here I am, like left with this deep feeling. And I learned that like that was my gift. And I think that's sort of the thing that I celebrate is like I found the outlet to use that. So it happened for a reason because I'm thankful that let me know what that feels like to use that in my work now. And
Mm.
I don't think I would have been able to give the performance in Love Venezia that I did had I not gone through all of the loops of just even going through the business and the ups and downs. I mean,
Yeah.
just everything was brought to that. So I'm thankful for it in many ways. As much as a lot of it was painful, I see why it happened.
What would happen if all this was stripped away from you? Like, let's say, for example, the calls stop coming. You're getting auditions, but you're not getting the parts.
Mhm.
It's just one thing after another where it's just not that momentum is no longer there. Like, how do you think you would handle that if you knew it come to the point where the people you worked with before, like, hey, listen, Daniel, we're sorry, but we're moving on to these things, and you don't more or less fit
Yeah,
the criteria or whatever the case may be. How
yeah.
do you think you would handle that for yourself? And the reason I asked the question about if you believe things happen for a reason is part of it's because when I say this here, understand I'm not saying this to you,
Right.
but
No, I get. Yeah.
yeah, but I asked the question because a lot of times when I see people that say they believe things happen for a reason is when things are going really, really well for them. But then I get
Mhm.
curious about their perspective, like what happens if it's stripped away like that, where it's no longer available? What do
Right.
you do then? So I'm
Yeah.
curious about how you think you would handle that for yourself if that were to stop. I hope it never does, but if it were, how do you
Yeah.
think you would handle that?
Well, I think everybody, I mean, no matter who you are in the industry, even famous, people, everyone has these spurts, like these sections where they're doing everything like nonstop. And then there's like a lull, there's a little period where it's not as much. I think everybody has these seasons and parts of it that they go through. And I think it's how you handle it. And like you said, I think for me, I think what it is it would happen for a reason in the sense that I would look at it and say, hey, maybe this same way of doing things isn't working anymore. I need to find a different way to pursue this and a different way to do it. And so if that happens at a certain point, maybe it's me getting behind the camera and saying, you know what, now I need to produce projects and put myself in them. Maybe now I
Mm,
don't need permission from other people anymore. Maybe it's me utilizing the contacts and the relationships that I've made and making my own things at this point. I think it's everything that happens for a reason is just to get you to challenge yourself and you can still do the same thing, but through a different way, if that makes sense.
I see what you're saying. Okay. So you brought something up now that actually piques my interest here. You ever think about doing that for yourself? Writing, directing, producing, anything along those lines for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely do. I sometimes think of certain projects or scripts that have come across or conversations with people, and I'm like, this would make a great film and a great project, and I would love to do this. So, yeah, I mean, if there's a certain point through this momentum or all of that where I can, network on that a little bit more and work with people directly and get to play some things that I really want to do, and then also, produce or anything like that too. I'm open to it. I feel like I have been doing that in many ways my entire life. I've been a business since I was a kid, and I think a lot of people forget that that's what it is when you're an actor, even as a kid, you're a product, you're a business. So
Yeah.
I never underestimate the fact that like that's something that I could tap into.
When you are when you're doing all this, we talked about why you believe these things happen for a reason for yourself, but like when you are acting and you see the final cut of the various projects you worked on, in this case, even some of the plays that you've done as well too, do you when you do those things, I guess the question I'm really asking is like, are you doing it purely for yourself? Or is there another motivation where I do it for myself, but I'm also doing it because I want to entertain people. I want to entertain, the person that I probably would have never met. if they had not seen this role that I played, and now I'm able to have a conversation with them. I'm wondering where your perspective is for yourself and how you look at why you do what you do from when you looked at it from the very beginning to where you are with it now.
Yeah, I think it's because I love to tell stories. I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay.
I believe in the meaning of it. So it's not from the perspective of like necessarily, oh, I want to entertain people. I mean, that's part of it, but it's more of the perspective of like, this is something interesting to tell. This is an interesting story. There's some meat here. There's some meaning in here. I think every project, even if it's a comedy, there's always there's some goal of it. There's some meaning to it. And I love sharing that with people, getting people to think about things differently. And I think ultimately it does make the world a better place. Like, even if someone like watching it, they may have been homophobic before, had their own certain
Yeah.
thoughts, or maybe just made jokes or whatever. I think they can watch this movie honestly and walk away from it with a completely different perspective. But they have to allow themselves to do it. And I think that's the key is you have to in any situation for growth, I think you really have to look internally and give yourself permission to be changed.
Right.
Like if you go into something saying like, "Oh, I'm not gonna like this because so and so, and the guy's gay, and he blah blah blah," then you've
Mhm.
already set the tone for what it is. You didn't really allow that product or that film to tell you a story. So if people come into certain projects like this with an open mind, I think they can walk away with a very different perspective, in general.
What do you think? I mean, I know I wonder for you, like if when you come off of this project, you felt like this is your best performance you've been able to do so far. But when you think about the future, are you thinking about in terms of like what exactly you're looking to accomplish, or take it day by day and then deal with with the task at hand, whether it be an audition, networking, whatever the case may be. Like, what exactly are you thinking about moving forward about how to prepare for what the next opportunity could be or possibly is going to be there for you? Because obviously it's not always guaranteed, but like, what's your mindset about looking ahead about about your career in the future?
I mean, I think the key is just, I mean, to be a working actor and literally make your income, primarily from that. I'm doing that right now. And so it's sort of this moment where like a lot of people, I think they think it's just being a celebrity, it's whatever. What I'm
Yeah.
already doing now is a victory and I'm thankful for it. And so for me it's to keep that momentum going, to see where I can go with it, how much more I can build on it. Kind of revisit it every year and see what I want to do at that point, and if I need to get behind the camera as well or do my own projects, whatever that is. But for right now, it's enjoying this wave. I'm a sort of in these prime years of my life at this moment where these things are happening, and I've kind of put that out into the universe, and um, I feel like I really have. Yeah, I mean, because when I think about it, and this is an important thing to stress, is I did all of this on my own. None of this was from an agent. None of this was from a manager. None of this was from a connection that I had. This was me, a boy from Kansas City who, went out to LA, was pursuing these things, found this opportunity for myself, submitted just like anyone else, and was persistent. This is from no other advantage other than the fact that I have worked my ass off and I am nonstop. I am at home filming self-taped auditions every single night, sometimes until like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's the stuff you don't see. It's
Right.
the discipline, just like being an athlete training for the Olympics. I think if you were someone who can do that, then you'll be fine in this industry and you can be a working actor. And that's what I'm doing. But if it's for any other reason, or if you just expect things to happen just from an agent or manager, I don't, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people trying to do what you're doing, and what will separate you is that. And so I'm confident on that. I'm confident of where this is going to lead from my representation. Now that they're seeing this body of work and what I bring, I'm not just going to an agent or manager saying, "Hey, represent me." I'm coming to it now saying, "Hey, here's our portfolio. Here's what I'm making this year. Here's what I booked by myself this year. what could we do together?
Mm. So when it comes to agencies and management, because there's an actor that I know by the name of Gary Kearns who doesn't have a manager or agency. He's literally doing everything on his own. He's pretty lucky when it comes to that because one of the few actors that I know that has been able to maintain that consistency where he's been able to get work on his own through the people he's worked with that um, call him on a frequent basis here. When it comes to that, like, when you're looking for someone to represent you, being an agent or manager, um, are you really expecting them to help you get the opportunities that maybe you probably couldn't have gotten on your own that they can probably get for you that more or less at that level up, if you will? Are you expecting that to happen considering the amount of work you've invested? Hey, I've done all this stuff over here.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to take me over there because I know you have connections, but this is
Hmm.
what I've done to back up my work. Can you
Hmm.
do that for me to take me over there? Is that kind of the perspective you have, or is it more like, what can you do to help me out? And well, whatever you can get me, we'll work it out.
Yeah, because I feel like I sort of hit this wall of what I like I'm maximizing what I have access to, like
Okay.
what's to the public, what's in the, the breakdowns that they post, because there's different things. There's actors access, which is the breakdowns that you'll have access to, but there's a whole set of breakdowns that are only to certain agents that I will never see, that certain actors will never even know about until it comes out. And that's what you need access to. And then it's where those relationships come into play, where it's like not just submitting a video, but somebody who, you're giving it to your agent who's submitting your video, and they just worked with that casting director who, just had one of their clients in another project recently, and then they already have that sort of, oh, here's so and so, and it's for the relationships too that, yeah, that definitely come into play that can help propel you. But first and foremost, it's access to other opportunities. And I'm realistic about it. It's not me coming into it saying, hey, I'm asking for a handout. It's saying, hey, I'm working really, really, really hard. I want somebody to help alleviate some of that so that I can focus on what I'm doing, you know.
Okay. When
Yeah.
so when you're looking at for roles now, what's the first thing that comes to mind like when it comes to the roles you're looking for? Are you looking for more media roles, like media by me, what I mean by this, like something much more heavier, whether it be dramatic or comedic or whatever the case may be. But are you looking for something specific that can take you more or less as far as your acting capabilities? You're looking to take it to the next level, or is it really just whatever's the best opportunities? I'm just going to focus on that and take that route instead.
I think it's more of that. Like
Okay.
it's really nice to I did like a short like comedic film like right after La Venezia, and that was a nice change of pace, just the ability to do something that was light at that moment. And so I
Right.
think sometimes it's really me listening to myself and I mean being open to everything, of course, that's a great project, but sometimes I am like I'll look through things and I'll be like, you know what, I'm really craving to do a thriller kind of situation right now, and kind of maybe putting a little extra attention into seeking out those opportunities, or things like that for sure. I found out that I really loved doing horror. I had such a great time. I had no idea what that was going to be like, and it was so much fun. It was like being at summer camp with, blood poured on you all night long. Like it was so much fun. I had such a great time. It was such a bonding, experience, like just hanging out with people covered in blood. Like it was just there was nothing like that. So it's keeping an open mind. I think years ago, if someone would have said I would have done this film and like some of the content that was in that, I wouldn't have. And so I
Mm.
needed to be in that mindset that I was to give myself the permission to say yes. And I'm so glad that I did.
What's one thing that you would never do acting wise that you're, whether it be you're against it or just not comfortable with it, what's something that you know right now that you would never do when it comes to a role that may be presented to you that someone says, hey, you can do these things, but we need you to do the following things. And again, you're not willing to cross that bridge for yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is yet.
Oh, okay. That's
If
interesting.
there if there would I'm pretty open-minded now, but definitely I'm sure there would be certain scenarios. I mean, I think sometimes script-wise, if something's in there unnecessarily, like if there's a certain slur or word that I don't want to use, I think I don't really need to do it because there's,
Okay.
unless it's like really necessary, um, for a specific project, like I don't really have desire to do a certain role like that where like I would have to trigger someone like that with a certain word that's like I don't know. I don't really I wouldn't want to probably do that unless it was really, really necessary.
You know, so when you're taking on projects, there's obviously a gamble when it comes to, what you expect and what you've read, what you've liked and so on, and then come to the production could be night and day. Um, have you ever taken something where you had a lot of high hopes, you worked on it, didn't feel the high hope at that same level, and then when you saw, you're like, yeah, it was nothing. What I read before did not come out in the final cut. And if you have experienced that, what did you learn from that in preparation about what you do in the next process for whether it be an audition, selecting a part, one being offered to you, whatever the case may be? Like, is there anything like that you can recall that has taught you that lesson, how you go about it for yourself moving forward?
I think it's really knowing, like going into it, like for me, realizing that you have no control over the edit in some of these situations. And so
Mm.
it's really important to go into it. Like I look at it now and I'll go do a certain scene. And no matter how you play it in your head, that's not how it's probably going to be. And so I think for me, it was quickly releasing that and thinking, oh, I'm going to position myself this way for this take, and I'm going to do none of that because everything that they're seeing, the way they're going to do it, it's going to be nothing like what's in your head. And so the second that I just started to focus on the character itself and the performance and less of those technical details of kind of what I wanted it to look like, I think that was a huge learning curve and a thing for me to be like, that's not something I have control over. If I am not the
Mm.
director, I I can't I can't know how they're going to do that. So don't even try to think of what that is.
What did you learn that for yourself? Like when you came to that realization, what was it that made you realize that to have
Because
that kind of mindset?
there was like a certain scene in like a thriller short that I was doing, and I was doing so much with my eyes, and like just being very much like all these little subtle movements where I was like positioned a certain way. And then when I saw it, like the cut and everything that they have, even while I was doing that, that's you don't even see it. Like you don't even see my face. It's the other person's dialogue. They have they're zooming on them. And so I was just like, I can't pinpoint, you know what I mean, when I'm
Yeah, I know what you're
doing
saying.
certain actions because I
Mm.
don't even know that that's the shot that so
I see.
you can't think about that. Yeah. Because
Interesting.
there's so many times you watch something back and you're like, well, they're like, why is it on her face right now? Like I'm talking or what, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
I know what you're
weird.
saying. I see what
Yeah.
you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Have
Because they
you,
feel it several different ways.
right,
Yeah.
right. Have you ever worked on oh, sorry. Was there a project that you tried out for, didn't get, and then when you saw it, you were like, oh, I would have definitely loved to have been a part of that.
Yeah, there's a few. I won't mention what they are, but there's a few. There's a couple that have done really, really, really well. And yeah, there's a couple where I'm like, that's interesting. But it's to each their own, and it was part of their journey, and I'm glad that it led me to mine for the moment.
What about if a part that you auditioned for didn't get, and then when you saw someone else end up getting that part, you realize, oh, they're perfect for the part.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there's been moments like that where you see it, but it comes into more of like a term of like, oh, I see why they did it. Like, if there's one where, like your sister's, someone who then like looked nothing like you, who they had as like the lead actress, then you'd be like, okay, I could see why they ended up choosing this other, and that had nothing to do with you.
Mm.
Sometimes there's a lot of those factors, or like the other lead actress that they chose was really, really, really short, and I'm 6'3", and they don't want
The
the
gap in
height
the height. Yeah, I
or
see.
there's a lot of things like that you see and you're like, oh, I understand why they why they did that.
You
But
know,
there, yeah,
I've heard this particular situation for tall actors because you mentioned you're 6'3". I had forgotten about that actually. I was going to ask you here earlier with that. Was that ever a factor at all for parts that you auditioned for and like, oh, you're too tall?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's
Okay.
definitely it. Just like for anything. I think when it's a blessing, like sometimes because it's really something where like you're considered for lead roles a lot. When you're the one that's like the commanding presence. Um, and that's a great thing, but it can also sometimes it can limit you just in terms of like, well, then you're against celebrities or names or something, and if you're not that yet, it's a harder bracket to break into.
I see what
Whereas
you're
if you're
saying.
just this small little supporting role, and let's say the lead actor they have is this guy who's 5'7", they don't want me to overshadow this maybe this lead actor, and so that's something that can come into play. But I always just just roll with it and learn to just let it happen and it has sometimes it's never a factor, but it can help in a lot of ways too.
What about with accents? Have you ever done parts that required you to change up your accent, whether it be putting on a Midwestern accent or a completely different accent that's not to your, as part of your lexicon? Like, do you have, is there anything like that ever come up at all for you at all, where you really had to challenge yourself in changing up the way you speak for a part? Or
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not even always even the accent. Sometimes it's like the cadence that you speak in. Everyone speaks in a different tone at a different pace. Some people speak really fast and some are really mellow and slow and like talk in a very low tone, or sometimes it's playing with pitch, and it's playing with uh just where this character might like settle in their own voice and in their skin and playing around with that. So I do a lot of that sort of thing where I'm like, okay, what is my version of this character and like who is that in me and who am I in this person and like where does that sit in my voice? And that's fun for me to play with sometimes too.
so I remember in a previous conversation you had before that you sing as well too, and
Yeah.
when you did theater production, you sang pretty frequently.
Mhm.
How have you been able to maintain yourself from not losing your voice and be able to sustain it for such a lengthy period of time? Because that's something that I remember hearing a lot of theater people say where they're seeing what 8 times out of the week, 7 days a week in most cases, and yet they're still able to maintain their voice and not lose it in preparation for the next production date or whatever the case may be. I'm curious about that, and then I'm also wondering if that also helps you in let's say for auditions or working on a project. Like, does that kind of particular training help? Does it parlay into what you do now, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like I took good vocal lessons and I did it since I was a kid. So I've always sort of been careful about singing properly. I think is the first thing is to make sure that you're, using your breath support properly and you're not screaming and straining your throat and singing from your diaphragm and just the whole thing, I think is it's a skill. I mean you can't some people you can't really your tone is your tone, but like what you can do as a singer is really play with I think your breath control and your ability to sustain that. So it's more than anything, it's just like an athlete. It's an endurance thing. Really having good breath control, I think.
What's um the biggest struggle you've ever had as as a working actor, whether it be for a part that you've gotten, auditions, or just the ups and downs? Like, what's the biggest hurdle you've ever had to overcome for yourself as an actor that if then that made you, when you look back and you realize that I'm glad I didn't quit because of that particular experience that I've gone through?
Yeah, I think it was as a kid doing it and into a teenager and just being so frustrated that there was that period where I was working, a lot as like a little kid. And then when you start to become a teenager and you're not quite an adult and you're not quite a kid, and there's that in between time where they don't quite know where to cast you or where to put you.
Mhm.
And when you're at that very impressionable, teenage kind of young teenage age, that was a certain period for sure where it was so frustrating because like I had based a lot of my worth on what I was doing since I was a little kid. And when
Mm.
suddenly that felt threatened, I had to kind of reprogram myself and and grow into that and be an adult and all that. That was definitely a hard thing where there was a moment where I was like, I don't know if I could do this. This is so frustrating. I was getting depressed. I was feeling really down. It
So
just
you really
wasn't.
put your whole identity in what you were doing as not necessarily seeing the downfall that could potentially come from, the that particular age that you were approaching at that
I
point.
did, yeah, because it was really the only thing that made me feel acknowledged and celebrated. I think
Mm.
at that age, because I so much of myself I had to keep under wraps. It was like when you're a gay teenager, like growing up, it is something where like it's always something you're very aware of, and it's something that unless you are a gay man, it's something that you'll never know. But it's just the basic everyday interactions and catering yourself to each situation that you have to really you become very aware of it, and it's definitely something that shapes your entire adulthood a little bit and how you handle certain situations just because of how you've had to sort of keep that. And so that's why for me as an actor as a kid, yeah, it was that release for me to be able to have more control and feel like I am worthy and I am acknowledged and all of those things because it was all about straight boys in sports and like that's all it was, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
it was a different outlet for me where I ended up, doing a lot of really, really cool things.
Do you when you think about the times you've started as an actor and where you are with yourself now, um, do you find yourself much more happier as a result of the path you've taken where it led you to, you led to a lot of, I'm not saying the acting field in general, but just the overall process for yourself as a child all the way through your adulthood where the things you have gone through, the heartbreaks, the dry spells, the high momentums and the various projects you've worked on, real estate, all that stuff. When you're seeing the ebbs and flows of your life throughout your, throughout your career, personal life, etc., do you find yourself when you look back at that and where you are yourself now, like, are you really in a good spot where you're truly happy with the way things are for you and how you're really happy with yourself? And the reason why I'm asking this is um, because of all the things you've gone through, you seem to me very grateful for what you have experienced that led you to where you are now. You've talked about the reasons why you believe things the way they happen and so on and so forth. But deep down inside, do you feel really happy about how things have turned out for you that even if you had some dry spells, you're happy with yourself because having that experience as a child where you were getting a lot of work, all of a sudden you were not getting anywhere because of that gap that you're in, that you've learned to adjust to adapt to this whole new set of situation that you're in, and therefore you overcame that. So it seems like you're very self-sufficient from what I'm gathering here. But again, going back to the question, do you feel much happier as a result of everything you've gone through and because of what you learned up to this point?
Yeah, I mean, in this specific moment, yes, I feel very hopeful and I feel very like inspired and excited every day to wake up and find out, what the next chapter and next opportunity is from this whole experience. So at this moment, yeah, I'm definitely happy in that and hopeful and in my element and I feel recognized and I feel like what I've always known that I could do, I'm doing it. And for me, that's a big thing is when I take those moments of gratitude and I look at that's why I mentioned that I do watch some of the projects and things that I've done because for me it's really that grounding experience where it's like no matter what's going on in here, the ups and downs of the day to day, like I'm doing it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yes, people are like you talk to anybody, they're like, yeah, being an actor is hard. Yeah, but I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm working and that's a victory.
Do you feel that if this were, I mean, you answered my question before, but like if you just if one day this were to stop, do you think it'd be on your own terms, or do you think it'll be like an organic process where, maybe my time is run out, where, I'm not the type of person they're needing for these parts, even if you're looking at for more or less the behind the scenes aspect where you're putting in more control of it, but like maybe it's not the same. But I'm wondering like if you think if you ever decide to if this were to stop, would it be on your own terms?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would
Okay.
be sort of me being honest with myself and saying like, does this bring me joy anymore? Do I have fun doing this anymore? Am I excited to do this anymore? And if that answer is ever no, um, then I think that's when, you have to listen to yourself and that's why honestly it was good when I took the break that I did and I went into real estate in Palm Springs because it really allowed me to reset. And I don't think it always has to be like a permanent thing. I think sometimes people make drastic decisions and they're like, okay, I'm done with this. I think you can have certain seasons in your life where like you do something and then you do something else and then you revisit it. And I would see it maybe someday it would be something more like that, where if I felt that I needed to reset again and then come back even stronger, that then I would.
This is a conversation that I honestly was not expecting to happen until Susanna made the suggestion to speak with you.
Yeah,
And and I'm glad she did because had she had not done so, I don't know if I would have done it right away to look into speaking with you. I think I eventually would have if I had seen once I had seen the film. I'm like, okay, I got to talk to this guy. But because I had the relationship with her beforehand, she was my first go-to.
right.
That being said, though, there was a lot that I have picked up from you from the previous conversation you had where you talked about how your parents had raised you and the support they've given you, your brothers as well too, and the various other things I've been able to come across that really piqued my interest about you as a person. But at the same time, the perspective that I'd never thought about asking at all when it comes to, you know, a man having sex on camera, being nude on camera or on stage for that matter, like that reservation that you initially had before. Because before I always associated just strictly with women, never so much with men. So that certainly had piqued my interest as well too, to kind of get your perspective on that as well, among other things that I was interested in asking here. And hopefully the questions I've asked you weren't too uh, convoluted here, but I do appreciate you giving me the time to speak with me because we're almost at that 2.5 hour mark here at this point. And I found a lot of what you've been sharing here with me quite fascinating. And at the same time, it gave me a lot new ways to look at certain things, especially when it comes to the more or less behind the scenes aspect of it for yourself. When you talked about the auditions and then the parts you've taken on and why you've taken them and the experiences you've had working on certain things that you had a certain perception of how you want to go about it and a complete change once you saw the final product about how to go about it instead moving forward. So there's certain things you've shared with me that has given me a lot to think about here. So for that, I want to say thank you. But at the same time, I think that what I've been able to hear from you now more in depthly here, I think there's a lot more things that I'm interested in seeing for yourself moving forward to see how your career is going to progress from there. Because just on the last year or so of what you've been able to experience for yourself, a lot of momentum has been building up here for you. I'm very curious to see how it's going to take off from there as your career progresses from there too. So, um, as a spectator, now as a fan, I've only seen very little of your work from what I have come across here. But from what I've been gathering from this role here, from what Susanna and Steve has mentioned here, and what you have mentioned, it seems you guys have a very wonderful project that everyone's very confident about sharing here. So I have a lot of high hopes and high expectations, to be honest with you, of what I'm going to be getting out of this year once I'm able to see it here. But apart from that, though, is there anything else that you are able to share that people can look out for moving forward from what they can be expecting from you that hopefully maybe coming down the line that you're able to talk about to get people to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be several things, but I don't have like I haven't been given the specific release details or any of that yet. So there's a lot. That's the thing. You hurry up and wait. You film, and film, and then it's like all of a sudden everything
Yeah.
kind of comes at once. But my Instagram, it's at D Bateman official, and I'll have everything posted there as it comes because there's going to be a lot over the next 6 months.
So for the camera, I just want to say thank you again for your time. I would love to revisit this conversation again once the film gets an official release, once I've seen it, so that way we can go more in depth with it, so we can talk about some of the more um, specific details that what I've come across in the film that we can kind of delve into further here. So if you're willing, I would love to have you back on here to speak with you. But for the cameras, I do want to say thank you. And I really mean when I say that there's a lot that I've learned from this conversation that I honestly did not expect at all that you have shared with me that I have a lot to think about after the fact that will in turn help me develop more better questions, if you will, that I anticipate to ask both Suzanne and Steve. That I'm hoping we'll be able to shed some more light on the project you guys have worked on here. That I'm really excited to check out here. So for the cameras, I want to say thank you, and until next time, cheers to you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. It's been great.
All right, so